Let's get going here and get this Q&A interview going with Aéropostale's SVP of Planning and Allocation, Karen Walter. Karen, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. So normally in this case, I would do a bio or do some type of an introduction. But I think what we'll do here is once we get the Q&A going, that's going to explain your background and kind of, how you started and your role there at Aéropostale. So we'll just leave it at that if that works for you.
That's all good.
Cool. So before we get going, I thought maybe it would be fun to throw up a slide of a who's who. So who's who, not in general, but who's who here on this webcast. I always like to know with these types of things, who am I on with and who also had interested in this topic besides me. And without getting too personal here, we just wanted to show you the types of retailers that were interested in this topic and perhaps facing some of the same concerns or issues or changes in their business as Aéropostale is and did at one time. And maybe not surprisingly, the bulk of these are specialty retailers and mono brands. Obviously, there's some pure play that you see, e-com. There are some department stores that are here. So we welcome everybody. The topic is across all of these. It doesn't preclude any of these at any point in time. So we hope you find the topics here interesting. We hope you find this data interesting in front of you right now. So let's, for those of you that don't know Select, it's probably a good idea to give you a little bit of background here. So very quickly, Select helps retailers understand the location-specific demand for an assortment of products. And what this does, this understanding allows retailers to make smarter decisions about the products they're offering their customers and across how much inventory they're buying, where they put products to sell, and where they ship them from. So lots of complex decisions to be made there, and we help them do that with the data they already have. And the result is what one of our main, phrases that we use a lot, at least if you're on our website or if you've heard of any of our previous webcasts. The result is optimized inventories throughout the merchandise planning and supply chain processes. And we accomplish this through patented advanced analytics and optimization technologies that we are not going to talk about on this webcast. We've talked about them a fair amount on other webcasts, and we have lots of documents and data sheets and such on our website. So I'd encourage you to check there, but we'd be happy to get into this further if you have interest afterwards. Just let me know. And our customers include brands such as Urban Outfitters, Aldo, Justice, J. Crew, and a bunch of others, and of course, Aéropostale. So a few things we'll cover today, just to set the stage. We'll be focusing on some of the big changes and expectations in the MP&A process overall and how those can benefit from advanced analytics. And Karen, of course, will tell us how she approached balancing new technologies with existing processes and getting buy-in internally, which is the big topic for this webcast. And so Shop Talk was, as I'm sure you guys all know, took place about a week and a half ago, or a little bit over a week ago. Feels like it was longer, and I was there, and there was a whole lot of brands there, and there was lots of sessions, lots of news releases, lots of points of conversation there that we've all heard and seen before. However, what was great about the show is that many of the brands that we know sent their C-level leaders there to talk about some of the changes or some of the ways that they're adopting new processes, new technologies, how they're changing their business to kind of move along the pace of changes that their customers are requesting. And Target CEO Brian Cornell was up there, and he did a session about the reasons why they made the changes that they did. So just Target evolving over the years. And some of it was about the self-preservation when it comes to Amazon, but the rest of it, according to Brian, was all about the customer. And Target rolled out these capabilities like buy online, pick up in store, curbside delivery, ultimately pushing closer and closer to same-day delivery. And same-day delivery is one of the big topics there of how fast can existing retailers push closer to that. And his big quote was that our guests had decided for us, their expectations around transparency, speed, simplicity, and convenience changed. Technology was just the accelerant. And instead of defending traditional models, we chose to embrace a change. So, Karen, I'm sure that kind of rings a bell in your head as far as that mentality, right?
Absolutely. I will say Target's a bit ahead of us on accomplishing that goal versus Aéropostale, but that is absolutely what's happening. The customer is dictating the way they want to shop, and what their new level of service is. And we just all need to catch up to them.
Yep. They definitely have a head start, and that's all good. We can all learn from that, the goods and bads, right? And Dana Randall from Tapestry, they were formerly called Coach, but now Tapestry is the umbrella company, I guess you could say. She had a very clear, calculated suggestion when it comes to approaching new territories like new technologies. Make a smaller investment to test, learn what you need to learn, validate what you need to validate to gain confidence across the organization. So I have a feeling that sentiment, again, Karen, is something that resonates with you as far as bite-sized pieces, right? Grabbing a piece,
100%.
run with it.
Yeah. This is something I could have said myself. We just, with the resources everybody has, the time and the priorities that that everyone's trying to accomplish, taking this process in small, manageable chunks is absolutely the same experience I've been having as the win, and gain that cross-functional alignment and that buy-in across the whole organization to go from one step to the next. It definitely is the approach that we're taking here.
No doubt. Seems to be a good one. So let's move on. Let's move forward here into the questions. So Karen, why don't we start? Like I said before, this is sort of a replacement for your bio, but why don't you tell the audience here, almost, I don't know how many we have currently on right now. I think we're close to 100. What's your background, and have you always been in the retail world?
So I have always been in retail. After graduating from school, I started with Gap Inc. in stores, and I worked in kind of their management program in stores, and then I was recruited to go into Allocation, and I started in Allocation and worked through Gap Inc. planning and allocation across all of the brands. Also did a stint in international, and then made the move back to New York from San Francisco with J. Crew, and I headed up Crew Cuts, planning allocation for Crew Cuts when it was in its infancy stages, which was great. It was a lot of planning and allocation, but it was also a lot of strategy, store operations, real estate, across the board, because we were a little startup, obviously, in a much bigger company, and a lot of those resources were shared. So you had to, you had to make sure that everyone understood why Crew Cuts as a new business was also a priority. So that was a lot of learning, a lot of growth there. Then I hadn't really had any e-com experience, indirectly, but not directly. And so I went over to Ann Taylor, and I was the head of planning for the Ann Taylor brand and the Loft brand for e-commerce. So that was a huge learning experience for me. A different approach to planning, obviously. And then I moved onto the Loft brand side, and took over the stores as well. And then I left there to come to Aéropostale. And Aéropostale has been obviously a really extraordinary experience in the time I've been here, which is about 3.5 years. I joined the company when things were not very financially strong. The stock price was very, very low. And I knew that change was necessary, and that's why they were hiring people into the certain roles. That things needed to change, or the company wasn't going probably to survive. We ended up going into bankruptcy, thankfully being bought out of bankruptcy, and now we are owned by a really unique situation in the United States, where we're owned by a brand licensing company as well as 2 mall owners. And so that is a really fantastic relationship. It's obviously benefited Aéropostale, and in this model now, we've had a year now out post bankruptcy, and now we're looking at what the next opportunities are, how we can continue to move forward. Our investment in Select is a big step in that direction, and we're kind of evolving as a same culture, same brand, but new company.
Yeah, I mean, it seems really interesting having that type of owner, a diversified set of minds, I guess, with having mall owner, those in the mall business, having a stake in Aero, and just having different mindsets. And then also being able to take a lot of it, for you at least, being able to take that split type of experience between the, the Ann Taylor loft, and then your prior experience with stores, and making some use of that across your latter years here at Aero. So what is it? It seems interesting to have a mall leader in that case, or a mall owner as an owner of Aero. So I'm sure that's also been, I guess, causing you and your team to have different views on things, or different outlooks on different types of problems.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating, and they would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Even though they're in the business of, they fill their malls with retailers, they really do not know and are nowhere near an expert in retailing. They are real estate experts, and
Sure.
they lease their space to retailers, but there's not a lot of communication post to that, right? After the lease is signed, the two industries really don't intersect. And so we have been teaching them quite a bit about the business of retail, and they've been teaching us, obviously, an extraordinary amount about their malls, their customers, and it's been great. But the assumption, I think, on both sides is that we both knew a lot more about what each other did.
Yep. Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's talk about your influencers as you've moved through. You talked about a whole bunch of steps that you took from your start in stores at Gap Inc., moving through your role now at Aéropostale. I mean, who would you hang your hat on as maybe an influencer or two?
There's I mean, I've been so fortunate to work for amazing companies, amazing brands, and been surrounded by the best of the best. But there are two people that stand out. One, probably not surprising with my background, and one that probably people wouldn't know. Certainly, an influencer on my career has been Mickey Drexler. Certainly he was the guy from afar when I first started my career. But by the time I got to J. Crew, we obviously worked a little bit more closely together. And the lessons of retail that I learned from him, have been with me my whole career, and they will continue to be with me. And I continue to pass those lessons on to everybody I work with. And most importantly, in relation to this conversation, is that mix of, call it, gut expertise and hard fact. And how to lean on the facts, and how to lean on the gut, and how to mix the two, and where to use one versus the other, or both, and the way you choose to use those two things in conjunction can mean huge success. It can also develop into major risk. And so every day he taught the lessons of retail, and every day you could watch him blend those two sides of approaches to the business, and it was extraordinary. And I was very, very fortunate to work with him and for him for as long as I did. The second big influencer would be my director. When I first got to the Allocation team in San Francisco, when I first went into Allocation, I did not know a lot about retail, and I didn't know that the job existed. And my director at the time taught me how to analyze the business. She literally sat down with me and said, okay, you have a problem, you have an opportunity, you need to break it down into pieces, you need to find data to support your hypothesis, and then you need to be able to convince others that your point of view is based in analytics, based in data, mm-hmm. and you use it as a way to influence others. And just breaking it down into those steps, and sitting there and truly teaching me the concept and how to see it through, obviously I've used for the rest of my career. And there are shining examples where she still pops into my head, and I still use the same technique with people on my team now. So those
That's
two
awesome.
were.
And that was at Gap, right, Karen?
That was both at Gap, yeah.
At Gap. And roughly when was that time frame wise?
1997.
So I asked that because it's it's an interesting stat right there, because that must have been a very rare way of thinking in a way back then, right?
Yeah, Gap was really trying to build the allocation organization. It was fairly new. Planning obviously was established, but they were building allocation, and they were recruiting quite heavily actually from their stores to fill those roles. And they wanted the allocation and the planning teams to be that analytical arm of the cross-functional team. And we didn't have a lot of tools. There weren't things like advanced analytics and big data, and that wasn't there, or at least not for us. But you could still get information. You could still have access to data. And the core concept of analyzing that data and understanding what looks like an opportunity and how to take advantage of it obviously existed as then too.
Yeah, fair. So during the last 15 years, I shouldn't say 15, roughly 15 years, have you seen, just given the brands you've been to and the roles you've had, have you seen anything like what's been going on with retail lately in the past 3 years, 4 years?
I think it's always obviously been a dynamic industry, and that's why I think it's so exciting. The pace of which change has been made over the last 3 or 4 years is certainly, I feel, different than the pace over the time before that. So it's always evolving and it's always changing, but things have been very, very rapidly changing recently. I think between the way the customer is now influencing how things get done and what they want and when they want it, obviously the technology has evolved leaps and bounds. We now do have access to 10 times as much types of data even that we had before. And then there's of course the evolution of the mall and the e-commerce business and how that's evolving rapidly as well.
No doubt. And I should add to the audience, everyone that's listening, we are going to insert some slides here and there outside of just the question slides that you see. So the bulk of these are just question slides. So feel free to just listen in as you would a podcast of sorts. But we'll be sure to, in the future, draw you back to the slide when needed. So, Karen, let's get specific into the planning and allocation side of the business. The changes that you've seen in retail, right? That's fine and good, and I think there's going to be no arguments there. As far as specific to the planning and allocation side, what have you seen, and how has that impacted you?
Well, when I first started out in planning and allocation, it was it was a financial position, but the analytical expectations, the recommendations that were expected from the group were nowhere near what they are today. And I think from then to now, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is we went through a period probably in the early 2000s, maybe to 2005, where it was almost as if we were trying to make planning and allocation a true science. And the desired candidate pool was coming from engineering and from science backgrounds. And we were really trying to, pull it apart essentially from the product piece of it, from the emotional piece of it, from the gut piece, right? It was kind of, let's see if we can make this only about facts, only about data, only about analytics, and
this
hire
doesn't sound like a happy ending right now.
Yeah, and statisticians and scientists to be in the world. That was true for a couple of years. We feel like as an industry have kind of moved past that, or at least my experience with planning and allocation has kind of moved through that. And while it's still a world where a lot of different diverse backgrounds can be very, very successful, I think, at least for me, come back to a place where, yes, planning and allocation needs to be financially and analytically based, but there is a piece of the art of knowing and understanding what you are planning and what you are allocating that actually is still a critical piece of being successful in the area. And so now we've got the opportunity where you've got people who are oriented toward analytics and potentially statistics and financially metrics, but they also love the industry because of what we sell and because they are, they like the product that they're working with. And that fits, I think, very nicely into where the technology is at the moment, because the technology, especially Select, is not trying to replace, gut and intuition and trend and go forward knowledge with data. They're trying to blend the two, and having people who are also oriented that way, combined with technology that they can use that kind of thinks in the same vein, and it is kind of a very happy marriage right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's critical. That's the way you got to do it. I can't replace one with the other. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So what's the process like when you're considering some of these changes, or when you're looking at a technology that may impact a business process change, or are they kept separately for a while? I guess what's your viewpoint on all of that, and how do you approach these types of adoptions?
For us here, and I think no matter where I would be, this core principle would be true. Sharing information constantly with your business partners, I
Mhm.
feel is 100% essential to honestly getting anything done, but also to actually just being aligned on what should be done. Um, you know, it's holding on to information doesn't benefit anybody. And so for us here at Aéropostale, we are expected, but also obviously like to make sure that other cross-functional teams, other business partners understand kind of what's going on with the business, what the opportunities are, what are different groups seeing, and how are they seeing that. And once you have a network where people are really talking to each other, that process then about considering a business process change or a new technology adoption becomes easier to even conceptualize. It's not, it doesn't make it easier to actually do, but it does make it easier because everyone can kind of see that the opportunity is there. It's much harder to convince somebody to change their process if they don't know why they're changing it. And it's not, that sounds easy, but in a bigger company with a lot of people running a million miles a minute, sometimes you're actually not as connected as you think you are. And so getting involved and sharing information, once people are connected, the change pretty much becomes obvious to the whole group. And then, you've kind of gone through that hurdle. And the same thing with technology. When the opportunity is there and everybody can see it, then it becomes about what do we want to start with, and which product do we want to go use. But you have to have everybody understanding that there is that opportunity before you can kind of go after it.
Right. So you have to have everyone together, at least speaking the same language, and then also, like you've mentioned before, understanding what the issue is that you're trying to solve. Right.
Absolutely.
So looking at some of the steps involved here, you sort of covered some of this just when you were speaking, but the stages that move through here, we've outlined it into 5 steps. At least you've provided these steps as the way you like to slice and dice how you approach a new technology adoption. Is there varying levels of, I guess, complexity to each of these in your eyes, and what's the time frame like between step 1 to step 5 potentially?
Yeah, it's definitely different depending on the sort of the size of the prize that you're going after. You know, the bigger the opportunities that cross multiple channels of the business or multiple cross-functional teams are obviously the ones that are going to be more lengthy, more expensive, more time-consuming. But even on a smaller opportunity, I still go through these steps. You just might be able to move through them much quicker. For our project in relation to Select, which is definitely one of the bigger projects that we've taken on as a company, identifying the problem was we wanted to buy a lot less inventory than what we've had in the past, and we want to make the smartest bets that we can. And we knew that it was going to be difficult with our history, with not as much history to rely on. The last couple of years were not something that you would want to repeat. So, what is our problem? The problem was we wanted to buy less inventory, and maybe we didn't have our own solid history that could tell us what we should be investing in. And that was, that still needed some conversation, but once you kind of get design and production and merchandising and planning and finance kind of aligned around that, the benefits about buying less inventory are actually very clear in a lot of groups, right? It's less styles you need. It's less shipment that's going to stores. It's less management at the store level. There's a whole host of benefits. But this was one of our big hurdles, was just the concept that it's okay to buy less inventory. So
Yeah, but
once
it's
we
also
got
having the confidence, right, Karen? It's about having the confidence you're making those right decisions about the inventory that you
absolutely.
are buying, and you're not cutting out the wrong things that there might be demand for, right? That's the
And
big
as
issue.
you're, as we moved the last several years, again, financially, we went into a bankruptcy. Those aren't years you repeat. Those
Right.
mistakes you don't want to make again. And so, so that you do have to have the confidence and a tool that will help you, right, gain the confidence to be able to continue to make those decisions was something that we were really looking for. But
Right.
it was just going to make things a lot easier to take that step. The cross-functional buy-in, you have to make sure that everybody is in a place where they can participate in a new technology. Meaning at that time, is everybody in a good place to be able to take this on right now? Or is there another priority or another project already in works that's going to impact one of the teams that need to be involved, and it's just not the right timing? So you have to find the right timing for that cross-functional buy-in, obviously assuming that everybody's bought into kind of the problem that we want to solve. Then we did quite a lot of shopping. I actually love this story. This is 100% true. The reason I found out about Select was because my IT counterpart was doing a reference for somebody, and they were speaking with Select and understanding enough about, because we talk all the time about what our business priorities were and what we were struggling with and what we were trying to solve for. He brought Select to me.
That's
So
funny.
I came to Select
You
via
didn't
our
represent him. I
IT
didn't know
organization. Yeah.
that.
But that it speaks to the connectivity, right? And it speaks to
Yeah.
everybody really understanding what we're trying to accomplish. So we also obviously shopped around. We did go with Select, but there's a lot of people out there who are trying to help companies solve these kinds of issues. And you have to find the right one for you, and which one you think is going to be the smartest and the fastest for you for you to gain benefit from. Then obviously you do need to prove it out. And I think that was what the quote from the beginning from Dana. But you do have to prove it. In order to spend money, you have to be able to prove that you're going to get your return back. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You can do some testing and some modeling. We chose to actually do a full-blown pilot with Select, so we could really get the financial benefit, the actual metrics, the change expectation, and then we built it into our structural financial plans for the year. So there's no question whether Select is going to be beneficial. It is going to be beneficial because we planned it into the financials. And I think that's where a lot of companies are. There's no longer the freedom to spend without the guarantee of the return, and you're going to have to sign up for those returns in order to push it forward. And then obviously continue to measure it and fine tune it to make sure you're getting the most benefit.
Yep.
And then the financial plan. I spoke to that. You have to you have to kind of sign up for it.
Yeah, you do. You have to prove it and then be able to prove it again in a way as part of the plan. So that's absolutely it. And it's important to have that agreement on both sides. So for anyone looking at solutions, it's got to have both the vendor and your team signed up and ready to go with that. So Karen, can you explain this?
Oh, yes. So I think like everybody, we have, field management conferences, and all of our district managers were in our offices several months ago, and they had a campaign as part of the conference to commit to something. And so each district, created their commit to list, and it was a really great moment of coming together in this conference, in our store conference. And so each corporate function decided that we were going to do it as well. We kind of stole the idea from our field organization. And so this is my planning groups. This was the unsolicited, essentially, or solicited but not pushed list of what we wanted to commit to, and making plan using Select, and you can see the rest. It kind of speaks to the fact that the team is 100% on board with embracing a new technology, some analytical help to kind of make better decisions go forward. So this was something that we've committed to for the year, hopefully for longer than the year, and we put it on a t-shirt.
Awesome. And I swear I didn't Photoshop
because
using
we're Aéropostale, we put it on a t-shirt.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Let's keep rolling here. So we've got a couple more questions, and then we can try to get to a few of those that were submitted by those that are here right now. Why don't we just quickly cover how has analytics in general, or advanced analytics as we like to call it, which as a side note, if you were going to define advanced analytics, and we're going to go off just a very, very quick tangent here, because I feel like we've talked about advanced analytics a little bit, and I just want to just very, very quickly define it. We here at Select look at advanced analytics as a really combination emerging between big data and the impact of machine learning and predictive analytics all smashed together, and being able to leverage your data and be able to have a few future-looking insights, future-looking prescriptive decisions being made off of that data. And that's where this term advanced analytics comes in right now. So that's, if you see it, that's what we're trying to say here. And I think, Karen, you might agree with some or most of that, right?
Yes.
Good. That's a good start. So how has it impacted your role, Karen? Your role, your team, and I guess the way that you look at your responsibilities as leading up planning and allocation for Aero?
It's actually impacted it quite a bit, and there was a little bit of an evolution of that impact as well. I spoke to it already a few years ago. This was actually a scary concept, because the expectation was perhaps I need to be an expert in advanced analytics. I need to understand how this data is coming together. I need, and how do I do that when I don't have that background? That's not what I do. How can I lead a team of people if the expectation is that they are going to be experts in the actual science of advanced analytics? And thankfully, it has evolved, like I said, fairly quickly to a point where I don't need to be an expert in the science of advanced analytics, and I don't actually have to hire people who are experts. I do need to find a technology partner who I trust to do the advanced analytics, and to be able to have a conversation with me about how to apply that to the opportunities and to the business that I'm trying to run. And so we've gotten, in my role, it's actually a more comfortable place where I am now versus a few years ago, because now I know that I can continue to lead my team and hire the people with the skills that that have always been successful in this world, but with an understanding that advanced analytics is going to be something that we want to use, rely on, continue to work with. But I have a business partner who's going to be able to speak my language and the advanced analytics language. I don't have to actually be that bridge. And that's, that brings more of the leadership and the strategy to the forefront of my role, rather than building expertise in an area that I didn't have. And that's been really key. It's been honestly key to even taking the step to introduce advanced analytics into the organization, into the team, into the business. If you're not comfortable with what you're doing, you're going to be a little bit more reticent to do that. And so I think that the technology has kind of caught up to a place where that is not the concern anymore. Which
right, it is a daunting term too, and even describing it is daunting. And there's this maybe unsaid thought that perhaps as a merchandising, planning, or allocation pro who's been doing this for a long time, now you're expected to understand all of this stuff, and that's not the case at all. Right? It's not there's no intention of turning that role into an analytics-driven role, meaning they're not going to start becoming data scientists or anything like that. Exactly. It's about how to leverage this data better and make better decisions. So absolutely. So the last main question that we have in the set here is if you have any successes that if you can share any of the successes that you've had so far.
Yeah, so we've just rolled out for our fall buying season. We have our men's and women's apparel teams using Select to place their buys. And for our holiday season, we now have our planning organization using Select to help build the plans in the first place. So that's kind of where we are. So
Awesome.
we don't have any product in store yet that we have used Select as a recommender. That's still to come. But the success so far, the key success has been the adoption throughout the merchandising and planning organizations. Those are the two groups that are most impacted right now from this, other than the IT organization that obviously got it all in place. But we've had several town hall meetings. We've shared kind of what the look and feel of the system with some of the other groups that work closely with planning and merchandising but aren't directly impacted by Select. We've also started to introduce it to some of the other areas of the company that could also benefit from the advanced analytics, but weren't necessarily part of the initial push, and they weren't part of the we need to buy less inventory and need to understand where better to place our investment. So we've had a lot of success actually getting visibility to what Select can do a little bit more broadly in the organization. And the adoption has been really strong. We had really good conversations post the fall buy about kind of where we were going into the buy, what Select recommended, what was the variation, why, where did we get comfortable with, what did we not, how often did we take the recommendation, and we that is part of our conversation. It was part of our investment meetings, and so we are speaking the language. We are not obviously experts yet, but we are speaking the language. And I think that so far, and I will say that at Aéropostale, in our past history, I don't know that new technology adoption has been something that we would say we're expert at. We've had some projects not go very well at all in the past. And this so far has gone very well, and I think that buy-in from the beginning was key. I think that the length of time we took to choose the partner that we chose was key, and staying very focused. Oh, right, here it is.
Yeah, I figured you were saying them, right. Karen. So I figured let's move off to the key takeaways, because these are the points, the really important points that keep you from making the mistakes that perhaps were made in the past, and keep retailers in general when they're approaching something new, right? Something new that hasn't been done before for them.
The point about knowing what you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Any software can do a lot of stuff, right? And any once you're talking about advanced analytics and data, you of course can apply it in so many different ways. But we have really tried to stay very focused on that initial question. Yes, like I said, we've started to now circulate it to some other groups and see if we can get more people involved. But for the teams that we are asking to use the system right now, we have stayed very true to our initial question. And I think that has been key to the success of the rollout. Like I said, you have to do your research. You have to find the right partner, and make sure that you're going to be able to work with them as part of your team. And then, of course, we've been talking about the cross-functional buy-in, getting all of that buy-in up front, so that when you're involved in the middle of the process and something doesn't go exactly perfectly, it's not an eye roll. It's not oh, here we go again. It's oh, okay, well, we can solve that and just move right through it.
Yep. So like I mentioned before, Karen, we had a bunch of extra questions that were sent in just for you. Aren't you excited? A whole bunch of questions. But we're not going to get to them right now. There's no way. I'm looking at them. There's probably 10, 15 of them. But I do want to pick one out that does blend well with what you've been talking about here. And I think what we'll do with the rest of them is maybe write out your answers to them and provide it to the listeners as kind of another way of answering questions if there's anything new beyond what you've said today. So the question is, which is a good one, and I think you touched on some of these, but do you have any specific maybe one or two of your biggest struggles before even getting to the point where you could do advanced analytics? It's kind of generic.
Yeah.
You know what the question is pushing at here? Yeah.
The two main ones come to mind as the biggest struggles to even get to this point. One was just the general idea that there is technology and analytics out there that can better predict customer behavior than you can with all of the knowledge that you have sitting here. There is still a little bit of the unknown that these things can work. And that's a big hurdle. You have to be able to get the buy-in that there is really not just the desire to be able to do your job better, but that this actually does make you do your job better. There is intelligence that is there that if you're not utilizing, you're at a disadvantage, and that's a big hurdle. You might have to do a lot of conversations, proving it out, dragging people to different forums, reading business cases. You may have to do a lot of legwork to get who you need to get to actually just embrace the idea that there potentially is a way to be smarter about what seems to be maybe something that you just need to quote unquote know, right? That you can have data to help you what you should know. And the second big hurdle is the cost. These things cost money. And so you have to be able to figure out, and for me, how do we invest in this and prove the benefit and still, and then kind of be able to pay the company back for the investment. And so those were two big hurdles. I think in terms of getting the funding, that's probably very company specific, depending on, the size of the company, the resources available, and the process by which money gets spent. For us here, it was coming out of bankruptcy. You usually don't hear we're about to invest in a lot of technology. So there was that, right. But there was also, sort of sharing why we need certain things with, again, a new ownership that doesn't really understand kind of the business to begin with. And that was a hurdle that they were very supportive about. We had a lot of conversations. And Select was obviously great about proving out the concept with the pilot. But that took some time. We didn't decide to enter into this 3 months ago. We decided to enter into this a lot longer ago than that.
Well, that's why it's such a good story, Karen. I mean, that's why, just looking at the struggles and the challenges and the way that that Aero is approaching the business now is a really compelling, interesting story that I think, we're doing this on purpose right now with this webcast to try to promote this and explain how this worked for you guys to other retailers or others that might be curious or in the same predicament, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we're going to leave it at that for the questions. We're going to try to respect everyone's time. It's about quarter of the hour. We promised you about 45 minutes. We want to stick to it. And so, on behalf of everyone here at Select, we thank you, Karen, for joining us for this. We thank everyone that joined us for the webcast today. We had a really good set of registrants and a good 100 or so people joined. So thank you for taking time out of your day to do this, to listen. And the slides, like I said before, the slides will be found on SlideShare shortly. We'll have them up there and we'll send you a note, as we will with the recording too. So that's it. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody. And have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you on the next webcast.
Thank you.